Welcome back to the deep dive. I've always been kind of fascinated by, charisma, something that makes people magnetic and influential. So today we're going deep into some strategies for dealing with difficult people, especially like those tough conversations that we all dread. We're dissecting some key chapters from this book on charisma, and trust me, it's not your typical self-help fluff.
What's really interesting is the book's premise that charisma isn't a single fixed trait, but it's more like a toolkit you can actually adjust your approach. The author calls them charisma styles depending on who you're trying to connect with.
Okay, so it's not just about being, charming all the time. Tell me more about these different charisma styles.
Right, it's much more strategic than that. The book digs into focus, visionary, and authority charisma. For example, imagine you're a CEO trying to win over a skeptical board member. You probably wouldn't use the same approach as you would with, say, a team of creatives brainstorming new ideas.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how do you figure out which style to use? Does the book give any clues?
It definitely does. The book provides a framework for identifying these styles, and it even has some self-assessment so you can figure out your own dominant style. But the key is to be adaptable.
Okay, so we need to be chameleons of charisma, changing our colors to suit the situation. I like it. But what about those really tough personalities? The book mentions Benjamin Franklin's strategy for winning over opponents.
Ah, yes, the classic tale of Ben Franklin asking his rivals for favors. It seems counterintuitive, right? But it cleverly exploits the principle of reciprocity. We're wired to want to repay favors, even small ones. And this can actually shift our perception of someone, making us view them more favorably. It goes beyond simple quid pro quo. It triggers a deeper psychological need for consistency. Think about it, if you've done someone a favor, you're more likely to rationalize that action by seeing them in a better light, even if you didn't particularly like them before.
So Franklin was basically hacking human psychology back in the 1700s. Now that's a deep dive. But how does this apply to, say, dealing with a difficult coworker or client today?
Think about how you can apply the principle of reciprocity in subtle ways. Could you ask for their input on a project, even if it's just a small detail? Could you acknowledge their expertise in a meeting? By making them feel valued and engaged, you're more likely to win their cooperation.
And on the flip side, the book warns about accidentally triggering people's defensiveness.
Absolutely. The book highlights how people instinctively try to rationalize their actions, especially if they feel they've wronged someone. And guess what their go-to move is? Blaming you.
Oh, so it's like adding fuel to the fire by making them feel justified in their bad behavior.
Exactly. The book stresses how crucial it is to avoid putting people on the defensive. Instead of attacking or blaming, focus on understanding their perspective and finding common ground.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act, but I can definitely see how this approach could lead to more productive conversations. But what about those situations where the tension is already high? How do we avoid getting swept up in the negativity? Especially those really stressful conversations that seem to just suck the life out of you.
The book uses a powerful analogy, comparing anger to poison. It's not just about the immediate discomfort. Chronic anger and hostility actually take a toll on our physical health. You know how they say stress is a silent killer? Well, anger is like taking slow-acting poison.
That's a pretty scary image. I definitely don't want to be poisoning myself every time I have a difficult conversation.
Right. So the book suggests we counteract those stress hormones with a healthy dose of oxytocin, the feel-good hormone. And a key way to trigger oxytocin is through empathy.
Okay, but how do you muster up empathy when you're facing someone who's being completely unreasonable?
It's definitely a challenge. The book suggests a pretty unconventional technique. Imagine that difficult person with angel wings.
Angel wings. Now, that's a visual I wasn't expecting.
I know it sounds strange, but the point is to shift your mental perspective. Instead of focusing on their flaws and their annoying behaviors, try to see them as a fellow human being, perhaps struggling with their own battles that you know nothing about.
It's like putting on rose-colored glasses. Only instead of rose-colored, they're angel wing-colored.
Yeah. Exactly. It may seem a bit woo-woo, but the idea is to access that wellspring of compassion within yourself. And when you approach the conversation with genuine empathy, you'll be amazed at how much calmer and clearer you feel.
Okay, so we're channeling our inner angels.
hmm
Now, how does this translate into actual practical advice for dealing with tough situations? Like, what about delivering bad news? That's something we all dread.
The book really emphasizes the power of nonverbal cues, especially when emotions are running high. When stress takes over, our primal brain kicks in, and it's much more attuned to body language than words.
So it's not just what you say, but how you say it. I'm starting to see a theme here.
Exactly. The book suggests leaning into warmth charisma, Convey care, concern, and empathy in your body language. Even if the message itself is negative, you're signaling that you understand and care about the other person's feelings.
It's like wrapping that bad news in a warm, fuzzy blanket. But I have to admit, I'm struggling to picture myself doing this while simultaneously picturing someone with angel wings.
Think of it as a two-pronged approach. You're using the angel wings visualization to tap into your own compassion, which then naturally flows into your body language. It's about creating a sense of shared understanding, even in difficult moments.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, what about another tough one? Delivering criticism. Nobody likes to be the bearer of bad news, and even hearing it can be pretty rough.
Right, criticism is a minefield. The book acknowledges how difficult it can be, but it also provides some practical tips for doing it charismatically. First and foremost, timing is key. Choose a moment when the person is receptive, not when they're already stressed or overwhelmed.
So basically, don't pile on when someone's already having a bad day.
Exactly. And when you do deliver the feedback, make sure it's timely, right after the behavior you want to address. This keeps it relevant and avoids dredging up old issues.
But how do you frame the criticism itself? I'm always worried about sounding too harsh or judgmental.
The book emphasizes focusing on specific behaviors rather than attacking someone's character. Instead of saying, "You're always late," try, "I notice you missed the deadline for that report. Can we talk about what happened?"
So it's about addressing the issue without making it personal.
Precisely. The book also suggests sprinkling in positive reinforcement, reminding them of something they've done well in the past. It's like a spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down.
Okay, so criticism doesn't have to be a soul-crushing experience. But what about apologies? I feel like so many apologies just fall flat. Is there a way to apologize charismatically?
Absolutely. The book highlights the power of a sincere apology delivered with presence, warmth, and power.
I'm intrigued by that power element. How does power fit into an apology?
It's not about being domineering, but about demonstrating accountability. A powerful apology goes beyond simply saying, "I'm sorry." It acknowledges the impact of your actions, especially in a professional setting. For instance, you might say, "I understand that my mistake caused a delay in the project. I take full responsibility for that, and here's what I'm doing to prevent it from happening again."
So it's about owning your mistakes and outlining a plan for improvement.
Exactly. It shows that you're not just trying to smooth things over, but that you're committed to learning and growing from the experience.
This all sounds great for in-person interactions. But what about those less personal channels like phone calls and emails?
Don't worry, the book covers that too. It encourages us to apply these same charisma tools to our digital communications.
I'm all ears. How do you infuse an email with charisma?
It starts with intention. Before hitting send, visualize the desired outcome. Imagine the recipient reading your message and feeling positive and receptive. This mental rehearsal can actually prime you for success.
So it's like setting the stage for a positive interaction even before the curtain rises. I like that.
And when crafting the message itself, prioritize clarity and concision. No one wants to wade through a wall of text. Think about the key points you want to convey and deliver them in a clear and engaging way.
I'm definitely guilty of sending those rambling emails that probably lose the reader halfway through.
No.
What about phone calls? Are there any charisma hacks for those?
There are. The book has a fascinating tip from author Lowndes. When answering the phone, resist the urge to be overly warm and friendly right away. Instead, answer crisply and professionally. Then, after you hear who's calling, let your warmth and enthusiasm flow.
That's a surprising one. Why would you hold back on the warmth initially?
It creates a subtle but powerful effect. By shifting your tone after recognizing the caller, you're signaling that your warmth is genuine and specifically for them. It makes them feel valued and appreciated.
Oh, so it's like saying, this warmth is just for you, special person. I can see how that would make someone feel good. Okay, I'm ready for the next charisma challenge.
Let's talk about first impressions. We all know they're important. But the book reveals just how powerful those initial encounters can be.
Right. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. But what makes some first impressions more impactful than others?
The book delves into the concept of tribalware. It's this idea that people are naturally drawn to those who seem similar to them. So if you want to make a good first impression, it helps to blend in with your environment, adapting your appearance and behavior to the people you're interacting with.
So it's all about fitting in with the tribe. Like if I'm going to a tech conference, I shouldn't show up in a suit and tie.
Exactly. The book even gives this great anecdote about American Express. They boosted their sales by hiring college students to sell to other college students. Customers were simply more receptive to someone they saw as one of their own.
That makes a lot of sense. So do your research, know your audience, and adjust your style accordingly.
Right on. And speaking of subtle cues, let's talk about something that often gets overlooked, the power of a handshake.
Wait, really? Handshakes are that important?
You might be surprised. The book cites research showing that a handshake can be even more influential than personality traits in job interviews.
Wow, that's incredible. That seems like such a small gesture, but I guess it makes sense when you think about it. It's often the first physical contact you have with someone.
Exactly. A good handshake can convey confidence and trustworthiness. On the other hand, a weak or awkward handshake can sabotage your entire impression, even if you have stellar qualifications. The book even goes into the worst offenders, the dreaded dead fish and the knuckle cruncher.
Oh, I know those all too well. The dead fish is that limp, lifeless grip that makes you question if the person is even alive. And the knuckle cruncher leaves you feeling like your hand just went through a meat grinder.
Neither one screams charisma. The book actually provides detailed instructions on how to give a good handshake. It's worth practicing until it feels natural and confident.
So we've nailed the handshake. Now, how do we break the ice and start a conversation in a way that's engaging and, dare I say, charismatic?
The book has some great tips for this. One suggestion is to compliment something unique about the person, maybe a piece of jewelry or a cool gadget, and then follow up with an open-ended question about its story. For example, you could say, "That's a beautiful watch. Is there a story behind it?"
I love that. It's so much more interesting than the usual, what do you do, small talk. And it shows you're genuinely interested in the person, not just trying to fill the silence.
Another classic icebreaker is the "where are you from?" question. No matter what the answer is, it opens up a world of conversational possibilities. You can ask about their childhood, what they miss about their hometown, or what brought them to their current location.
It's like a doorway into their personal narrative. And I imagine the key to keeping the conversation flowing is to ask those open-ended questions that encourage them to share more about themselves.
You got it. Steer clear of those closed-ended questions that can be answered with a simple yes or no. Instead, aim for questions that start with what, how, or why. You want to spark those deeper, more engaging conversations.
So we've broken the ice and had a fantastic conversation. Now, how do we exit gracefully without leaving the other person feeling like we're rushing off?
The book advises looking for natural transition points in the conversation. Maybe they just finished sharing a story, or there's a lull in the discussion. That's your cue to make a smooth exit. And when you do leave, try to leave them with something positive to remember you by.
Like what? A parting gift.
Not literally. But you could offer value. Maybe recommend a book or article related to something they mentioned, or offer to connect them with someone who might be helpful to them.
That's a great idea. It's like leaving a little trail of goodwill and connection.
And speaking of connection, let's talk about a skill that's absolutely crucial for building charisma, the art of listening.
Okay, but isn't listening just about, letting the other person talk?
It's much more than that. The book emphasizes the importance of being fully present, both mentally and emotionally. It's about truly engaging with what the other person is saying, not just waiting for your turn to talk.
I'm definitely guilty of that sometimes. My mind starts racing ahead, thinking about my response, and I miss half of what they're saying.
We've all been there. The book suggests a powerful practice. Refrain from interrupting, even when you're bursting with ideas or excitement.
That can be tough, especially when you're passionate about the topic.
It is, but holding back and letting the other person finish their thought shows respect. And it demonstrates that you value what they have to say.
It's like saying, I'm here for you and I'm truly listening.
Now, this next one might surprise you. Let others interrupt you.
Wait, what? Isn't that bad manners?
It can be, but the book argues that allowing someone to interrupt you, even if they're wrong to do so, can actually build rapport.
Okay, now I'm really curious. How does that work?
It's about making the other person feel heard and validated, even if they're not technically correct. By letting them interrupt, you're signaling, I'm not threatened by your input, and I'm open to hearing your perspective.
So it's a bit of a power play.
Yeah.
Like saying, I'm so confident and secure that I'm not bothered by your little interruption.
It can be seen that way, but it's also about creating a sense of psychological safety in the conversation. It makes the other person feel comfortable sharing their thoughts, even if they're not perfectly polished or well-timed.
That's really fascinating. It's like flipping the script on traditional communication etiquette. I'm eager to try this out and see how it works in real life.
Let's move on to another interesting concept. The book explores the white elephant trap.
Intriguing name. What's that all about?
It's based on the idea that mentioning something negative, even if you're trying to downplay it, can actually make it more prominent in people's minds.
Like that classic example. If I tell you not to think of a white elephant, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
Of course, a white elephant. So when we say things like, don't be offended, or this might be bad news, we're actually planting those negative seeds in their minds.
So even if our intentions are good, our words can backfire and trigger those negative associations.
Exactly. The book gives an example of a manager leaving a voicemail for an employee, saying something like, "Hey John, it's Sarah. I'm calling about your proposal. I have some bad news." Well, I shouldn't say that, but it's something you may find insulting, and I definitely don't mean it that way. Anyway, call me back.
Oh no, Sarah just planted a whole field of negativity. Poor John is probably dreading that callback.
Right. So the book highlights the importance of choosing our words carefully, especially when delivering sensitive information. Instead of priming them for negativity, focus on being direct and supportive.
It's like the old saying, think before you speak. But in this case, it's think before you leave that voicemail.
Now let's talk about setting the stage for those difficult conversations that we know are inevitable.
Okay, so we've got a tough conversation looming. What can we do to make it less, well, tough?
The book emphasizes the importance of choosing the right environment. It explains that people often transfer their feelings about a space onto the experience itself.
So if we're in a comfortable and inviting setting, we're more likely to feel relaxed and open to having a productive conversation.
Exactly. Avoid those noisy, chaotic environments that make people feel on edge. Instead, opt for a space that feels calm and welcoming. The book even suggests using props to increase comfort and ease.
Props, like we're putting on a play.
Not quite. But think about having something like Play-Doh on hand. It can provide a subtle distraction and help people feel more at ease, especially those who tend to fidget when they're nervous.
I love that idea. It's like giving their hands something to do so their minds can focus on the conversation. Are there any other environmental hacks?
The book mentions the positive effects of candles, firelight, and background music. It's about creating a cozy and inviting atmosphere that encourages open communication.
Okay, I'm picturing a fireplace, some soft music, and a bowl of Play-Doh. Sounds like my kind of difficult conversation. But what about those times when we're feeling anxious and overwhelmed, no matter how cozy the environment?
That's where the rewriting reality technique comes in. It's a powerful tool for navigating those challenging situations and maintaining our charisma even when our inner critic is screaming.
Rewriting reality. That sounds almost like magic. Tell me more.
It's based on understanding our brain's negativity bias, this tendency to fixate on the negative, even when it's outnumbered by the positive. You know how that one critical comment can completely overshadow a dozen compliments?
Oh, tell me about it. My brain seems to have a special talent for latching onto those negative bits.
The book shares a great example of a graphic designer named Mary. She was asked to present her work to a client's management team, which should have been an exciting opportunity. But her client mentioned that his boss wasn't initially impressed with her work. Guess what Mary's mind focused on?
The negative comment, of course.
Exactly. This negativity bias distorts our perception, making us feel more anxious and less confident than we should be. So the rewriting reality technique is all about consciously choosing to focus on the positive, even if it feels a little delusional at first.
So we're basically tricking our brains into seeing the world through rose-colored glasses.
It's more than just trickery. It's about recognizing that our thoughts create our reality. If we can choose to see the positive, even when it's tough, we can shift our emotional state and project a more confident and charismatic presence.
It sounds like a mental workout.
Yeah.
Are there any specific exercises for rewriting reality?
The book suggests a few. One is to imagine your negative thoughts as a radio that you can turn down, or even switch off completely. Another is to consider the worst-case scenario. Often when we actually think it through, the worst case isn't as bad as our anxiety makes it seem.
And even if it is bad, we'll probably survive, right?
Exactly. We're much more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. The book also suggests recalling past experiences where you felt similarly anxious but ultimately made it through. It's a reminder that we've faced challenges before and we can face them again.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this works. We're basically retraining our brains to focus on the positive and trust in our own ability to handle whatever comes our way. But does it actually make us more charismatic?
The book argues that it does. When we believe in ourselves and see the situation in a positive light, we project confidence and warmth, which makes us more likable and persuasive. The author shares a personal anecdote about using this technique successfully in Bogota. He was scheduled to give a presentation to a group of senior executives. and was feeling incredibly nervous beforehand.
So what did he do? Did he picture everyone in their underwear?
Not quite. The night before the presentation, he couldn't sleep and was convinced he was going to bomb. But then he decided to rewrite reality. He visualized the presentation going perfectly, the audience engaged, himself feeling confident and in command.
Did it work?
He says the presentation went even better than he had imagined. He attributes much of his success to that intentional shift in perspective.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. It's like the power of positive thinking, but on steroids.
It is powerful, and the book offers some specific examples of rewriting reality in everyday situations. Imagine interpreting a sarcastic message as an attempt to connect rather than an attack. Or view a traffic jam as a life-saving intervention, preventing you from getting into an accident further down the road.
It's like turning those lemons into lemonade one thought at a time.
Exactly. By choosing to see the positive, we create a more positive and charismatic presence. And that's something everyone can benefit from. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's take a quick recap of what we've covered so far.
We started by exploring the idea that charisma isn't a fixed trait, but more like a toolkit of adaptable styles. We delved into Benjamin Franklin's clever use of reciprocity to win over opponents, and discussed how to avoid triggering defensiveness in others.
We explored the importance of counteracting stress with empathy, even going so far as to imagine difficult people with angel wings. And we tackled those tricky topics of delivering bad news and criticism with grace and compassion.
We uncovered the power of a sincere apology, one that goes beyond just saying "I'm sorry" and demonstrates true accountability. And we even learned how to sprinkle charisma into our phone calls and emails, making those interactions more engaging and impactful.
We discussed the crucial role of first impressions, from adapting our style to fit the tribe to mastering the art of a confident handshake. And we explored techniques for breaking the ice and exiting conversations gracefully, leaving a trail of goodwill in our wake.
We delved into the often overlooked art of listening, discovering that it's about being fully present and engaged, not just waiting for our turn to talk. And we even learned how strategically letting others interrupt us can actually build rapport and create a sense of psychological safety.
We uncovered the white elephant trap and learned to choose our words carefully to avoid unintentionally planting negative seeds in people's minds.
And we explored how to set the stage for difficult conversations, using environmental cues and even props to create a more comfortable and productive atmosphere.
Finally, we explored the powerful rewriting reality technique, discovering how to combat negativity bias and choose a more empowering perspective, one that can actually boost our charisma and help us navigate even the most challenging situations.
Whew, that was a lot. But I feel like we're just getting started. There's so much more to uncover about this fascinating world of charisma.
Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll explore even more strategies and techniques for becoming your most charismatic self. Welcome back to our deep dive into charisma.
It's amazing how much we've already unpacked about this fascinating subject. I'm starting to see charisma in a whole new light, not just as this elusive quality, but as a set of skills and strategies that we can all learn and apply.
Exactly. And in this part, I want to delve deeper into one of the techniques we touched on earlier, the rewriting reality technique. It's such a powerful tool for dealing with those inevitable moments when our negativity bias takes over, threatening to sabotage our charisma.
I'm all for any technique that helps me outsmart my inner critic. So how do we actually go about rewriting reality?
Hmm.
Is it as simple as just telling ourselves everything is fine, even when it feels like the world is falling apart?
It's not about denying reality or pretending that challenges don't exist. It's more about consciously choosing a more empowering perspective, recognizing that our minds often distort reality by amplifying the negative and minimizing the positive.
So it's like adjusting the lens through which we see the world, focusing on the possibilities instead of getting bogged down by the problems.
Exactly. It's about training our brains to see the good even when it's hiding in plain sight.
The book talks about the importance of conserving our willpower, especially when it comes to dealing with those everyday annoyances that can drain our energy.
Yes. Willpower is like a muscle desal. It can get fatigued if we overuse it. And when our willpower reserves are depleted, we're more likely to react impulsively and less likely to access our charisma.
So how do we protect those precious willpower reserves?
One strategy is to delegate or even trade tasks that are particularly willpower depleting. For example, if you know you have a challenging meeting later in the day, try to delegate any tasks that might drain your mental energy earlier on.
That makes sense. It's like strategically allocating our mental resources so we can bring our A game to those high-stakes moments
Yeah.
where charisma really matters.
The book also suggests warming up for those key moments. Just like an athlete warms up their body before a competition, we can warm up our minds and emotions to boost our charisma.
I've never thought about warming up for a conversation. What does that actually look like?
It can involve anything that puts you in a positive and energetic state, like listening to upbeat music, talking to a supportive friend, or even taking a few minutes to visualize yourself succeeding.
So it's about creating a positive mental climate that primes us for charismatic communication.
Exactly. And the book provides a helpful checklist of things we can do to warm up before important events, whether it's a meeting, a presentation, or even just a social gathering.
Okay, so we're rewriting reality, conserving our willpower, and warming up for key moments. But what about the actual communication itself? How do we use our words and body language to project charisma?
That's where nonverbal communication comes into play. And it's more important than you might think.
I've heard that nonverbal cues can actually carry more weight than the words we say.
That's right, especially in those high-stakes situations where our fight or flight response kicks in. Our body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice all send powerful messages that can either enhance or undermine our charisma.
So it's not just about what we say, but how we say it.
Precisely. And charismatic people are masters of nonverbal communication. They know how to use their bodies and voices to convey confidence, warmth, and authenticity.
The book mentions this fascinating concept called emotional contagion, which is the idea that our emotions can actually spread to other people.
Yes, it's like a ripple effect. Our mirror neurons pick up on the emotions of those around us, and we unconsciously mimic their body language and facial expressions.
So if we're around someone who's feeling stressed and anxious, we're likely to start feeling that way too.
And the same goes for positive emotions. If we're around someone who's feeling confident and optimistic, we're more likely to feel that way ourselves.
So this means that our own emotional state can actually influence the emotional state of those around us. That's a pretty powerful responsibility.
It is, and it highlights the importance of being mindful of our own emotions, especially if we're in a leadership position.
So if we want to create a positive and productive work environment, we need to make sure we're projecting the emotions we want to see in others.
Absolutely. And the book offers some specific techniques for using our body language to boost our charisma. One of the most effective is mirroring.
Mirroring. Is that like looking in a mirror?
Not exactly. It's about subtly matching the body language and facial expressions of the person you're interacting with.
So if they lean forward, we lean forward too.
Precisely. It's a way of creating rapport and showing that we're on the same wavelength.
That makes sense. It's like saying, I'm with you, I understand you.
The book shares an interesting anecdote about a client who used the mirroring technique successfully in a business meeting. He was meeting with a high-level executive and wanted to build a strong connection.
So he started mirroring the executive's body language.
Yes, and the executive responded very positively. The meeting went smoothly, and the client felt like he had established a genuine rapport.
But what about those times when the other person is exhibiting negative body language? Should we mirror them then?
That's a great question, and it depends on the situation. In some cases, it might be helpful to first mirror their negative body language to establish rapport, and then gradually shift to more positive body language.
So if they're crossing their arms, we might start by crossing our arms too, but then slowly uncross them and see if they follow our lead.
Exactly. It's a subtle way of guiding them towards a more positive emotional state without directly confronting them or making them feel judged.
But I imagine there are also times when we don't want to mirror negative body language.
Right. If someone is being aggressive or confrontational, mirroring their body language could escalate the situation.
So in those cases, we need to find other ways to de-escalate this situation and maintain our own composure.
The book offers some helpful tips for dealing with defensive body language. For example, if someone is sitting with their arms and legs crossed, we can try to break their posture by handing them something, like a pen or a piece of paper.
That's an interesting idea. It forces them to change their position, and it can also create a moment of distraction, which can help to break the tension.
Now let's talk about personal space, which is another important aspect of nonverbal communication.
I definitely know when someone's invading my personal space bubble, it can be really uncomfortable.
Most people have a pretty well-defined comfort zone when it comes to personal space, and violating that space can make people feel threatened or uneasy, which obviously doesn't help with charisma.
So it's important to be aware of our own personal space boundaries and to respect the boundaries of others.
Absolutely. And the book offers some interesting insights into how personal space affects our interactions. For example, did you know that sitting next to someone can create a greater sense of intimacy and trust than sitting across from them?
That's fascinating. I never really thought about it that way, but it makes sense. When you're sitting side by side, you're literally facing the same direction, which can create a sense of shared purpose and connection.
Exactly. And it's something to keep in mind when we're choosing seating arrangements for meetings or social gatherings. We want to create an environment that fosters connection and trust.
The book also mentions the importance of avoiding seating arrangements that make people feel vulnerable or exposed, like sitting with your back to an open door or a window.
Right. It can make people feel anxious and on edge, which isn't conducive to open communication
Mm.
or charismatic presence.
Now let's talk about the eyes. They say the eyes are the windows to the soul.
And they play a crucial role in charismatic communication. Good eye contact conveys confidence, interest, and connection. But too much eye contact can be creepy, and too little can make us seem shifty or untrustworthy.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot.
The book offers some helpful guidelines for making eye contact, like aiming for a gaze that's soft and focused rather than intense and staring. And it also suggests breaking eye contact occasionally to avoid making the other person feel uncomfortable.
And when we're listening, it's important to maintain eye contact to show that we're paying attention and engaged in the conversation.
Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about how to project power through our body language.
Power. I thought charisma was all about warmth and likability.
It's both. Charisma is a blend of warmth, power, and presence. While warmth is about making people feel comfortable and connected, power is about commanding respect and attention.
So how do we project power without coming across as arrogant or intimidating?
The book talks about the importance of being the big gorilla.
Big gorilla, that sounds a bit intimidating.
It's not about being aggressive. It's about taking up space and projecting an aura of confidence and authority.
So like puffing out our chests and standing tall.
Yes, but it's also about being still and deliberate in our movements, like a regal lion surveying its territory.
I can see how that would convey a sense of power and presence.
The book mentions an exercise where students were asked to walk around a crowded campus and try to get other people to move aside for them. The students who were most successful were the ones who adopted the big gorilla posture. They took up space, made eye contact, and moved with confidence.
And this is something we can all practice in our everyday lives, whether we're walking down the street, giving a presentation, or simply interacting with colleagues.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a physical presence that commands respect and attention.
The book also talks about the importance of breathing deeply.
Yes, when we're feeling stressed or anxious, our breathing tends to become shallow, which can make us feel even more tense and out of control.
So taking a few deep breaths can help to calm our nerves and project a more relaxed and confident demeanor.
And the book offers some simple breathing exercises that we can use to boost our charisma.
Well, this has been a fascinating exploration of nonverbal communication.
Mm.
I'm starting to realize just how much our bodies and voices convey, even when we're not saying a word.
And the more we understand these nonverbal cues, the more effectively we can use them to enhance our charisma.
We're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into charisma.
It's been quite a journey, exploring all these fascinating nuances of communication and influence.
I feel like I've been taking notes nonstop. We've covered so much ground already. Charisma styles, body language, the power of rewriting reality. But the book still has more to offer, right?
Absolutely. In this last part, let's zoom in on some subtle but powerful techniques that can really elevate your charismatic presence. It's like polishing those rough diamonds we've unearthed.
I'm all about adding some extra shine. What's first on the polishing list?
The book talks about the importance of avoiding verbal and nonverbal reassurances, especially if you're aiming to project power. Things like head nodding, saying uh-huh constantly, or excessive agreeing can actually backfire.
Wait, really? I thought those were signs of active listening and engagement.
They can be, but the book argues that in certain situations, these reassurances can make you appear less authoritative, almost like you're seeking approval.
So it's like accidentally undermining your own power?
Exactly. The book uses a fascinating analogy. Imagine a subordinate chimpanzee grooming a dominant one.
Okay, I'm picturing those nature documentaries where the chimps are meticulously picking at each other's fur.
Right. Now, the subordinate chimp is trying to be helpful, but this constant grooming actually reinforces the power dynamic, making them seem subservient.
So if I'm constantly nodding and agreeing, it's like I'm grooming the other person, making them feel more powerful.
That's the idea. The book suggests that being still and attentive, letting your silence convey confidence, can actually be more powerful. It's about owning your presence.
It's like saying, I'm here, I'm listening, and I have something valuable to contribute. No frantic nodding required.
Exactly. Now let's talk about another often overlooked element of charismatic communication, your voice.
I've definitely noticed that some people just have those naturally captivating voices. Rich, resonant, the kind that makes you want to lean in and listen.
And while we might not all be born with a radio-ready voice, the book assures us that we can definitely improve our vocal presence. It's about tuning your instrument.
Okay, I'm ready for my voice lesson. What are some tips for making my voice more charismatic?
The book recommends speaking slowly and deliberately, pausing between sentences, and letting your intonation drop naturally at the end of a phrase.
So it's the opposite of rushing through my words like I'm reading a disclaimer at the end of a commercial.
Exactly. It's about savoring your words, letting them land with impact. It conveys confidence and gravitas.
I love that. It's like giving each word its own moment on stage. Are there any other vocal tricks?
The book emphasizes the importance of breathing deeply. When we're stressed, our breathing becomes shallow, which can affect our voice and make us sound shaky.
So taking a few deep breaths before a big presentation can actually help me sound more confident.
Absolutely.
Yep.
It calms your nerves, oxygenates your brain, and gives your voice that resonant quality we were talking about. The book even includes some specific breathing exercises to try.
Going through this book, I'm realizing that charisma isn't about some magical quality that you either have or you don't. It's more about a set of skills. And like
Yeah.
any skill you can practice and improve.
I completely agree. The book demystifies charisma, breaking it down into practical techniques and strategies.
It's been such an insightful deep dive. I feel equipped with a whole new toolbox for navigating difficult conversations and relationships. Any final words of wisdom before we wrap up?
I think the most powerful takeaway from the book is this: charisma is a choice. Every interaction is an opportunity to be more present, more engaging, more influential. It's about consciously cultivating those mental states and practicing the techniques we've explored today.
So, to all our listeners out there, I say go forth and be your most charismatic selves. The world is waiting to be charmed.
And until next time, keep those conversations flowing, those connections sparking, and that charisma shining.